yeah, lures.
Yeah. Good morning and welcome inside a live edition of the Scores Table. Danny, I was wondering about the numbers, and apparently they're 0. So it's just you and me talking to each other and everybody on recording. Man, there is nothing more disheartening than seeing a 0 next to the eyeball. That is
okay.
A first for me.
I'll text my parents real quick. They'll hop on for sure.
Maybe we can get Sable in from his daughter's official visit to step aside for a minute and tune in to bolster the numbers. But in all seriousness, we're here to talk about the Class 3A, Class 4A state championship games last night. A really good game to start us off in a game that honestly didn't look like it was going to be very good. But how about Norwell coming back from 19 down to cut within a point? Then they get within 3 at the end, had a look at the buzzer that just would not go. But a phenomenal game, and we should start with Gibson Southern in that 3-point barrage. 11 threes, 6 of them from Chloe Graham, both of those state game records. Danny, I'll let you take the charge on this one while I tweet some things out.
Yeah, Gibson Southern, they're so fun to watch, man. So a lot of the way basketball is played now, I mean, some of the advanced analytics looks at points per possession. And Gibson Southern, I guess I never realized it, but that's, it's kind of new age basketball. It's was popularized a lot by Coach Kerr and the Golden State Warriors and things like that. But it was a lot of threes and a lot of layups. They kind of eliminate that mid-range too. And they were cold, man. They were cold from the 3-point line last night. Like Ava Malone hit a monster. I remember in the weeks leading up, I remember talking about, I think in the semi-state versus Washington, I think it was like Ravelette and Malone had 12 and 9, I think, for 21 total points. Ravelette and Malone had monster threes last night. Spink had the big one. Like she had the one shining moment one, the one I think that put him up 4 points with 90 seconds left. Like that's a cold-blooded three. But they're so fun to watch because if they weren't shooting threes and making threes, they were throwing it to Paige Schnaus and getting layups. And when you're getting wide open kick out threes and layups, you're not going to get beaten. I completely missed that against the 1-3-1. So good for Gibson Southern, but they were so fun last night. That game, you're right, was awesome.
And, we were wondering, how do they go about beating the 1-3-1 and the vaunted pressure and everything that Norwell brings defensively? I mean, that's a really good defense. And the answer is you just don't let them make shots. I mean, it was – They forced everything. They were the ones forcing turnovers. Gibson Southern was. They never really gave Norwell a chance to set up their press, and that really, I mean, that kind of sent the message early. And yeah, it just kind of carried through most into the third quarter. It felt like.
Yeah. Well, so let's unpack that right away. Okay.
Sure.
A big storyline for Gibson Southern last night, another thing that I missed in this 3A game was I thought the difference in the game was their ability to defend Norwell in the half court. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think Norwell got good looks. And so, and you're going to have to use your mind's eye to really kind of see this, but Norwell's man's system is the basics of dribble drive that Calipari and Kentucky and everybody kind of ran. And if you can imagine both tops filled, like the 4 on a dice, and then that 1 is kind of floating around on the block. They teach that kid that the ball has a disease. So as it comes to you, you kind of space away from it, a space away from the ball so you don't pick up the disease. But in that dribble drive, it's designed to have gaps to drive in. And Norwell wanted to drive into those gaps, draw help, and kick to open shooters. Well, Gibson Southern stayed home. They just stayed home. And if you notice that basketball game as it was playing out, and the people I was watching with a lot of coaches, we all were talking about the same thing. They were getting to their spot, but they were getting to like 8 feet, and they had a lot of like up and unders. And that was why Rosworm had such a big game, is because she can get downhill and kind of attack. But when Gibson decided to stay home, Norwell didn't have the ability to get that kick out 3, those catch and release, shoulder square 3s, and they just had to take those contested 2s. And that was a big, big deal going into the game as to how Norwell would score from the 3-point line. I kind of said it when we did the live show in between games that I think the key was going to be able to get Filling and Feast open looks. They couldn't do it because they guarded without help. So it was really good from the 3-point line, but he made a joke. It was like, hey, we gave up 60 points to a really good team. Dude, that was a really good defensive performance by Gibson Southern. Really good.
That was unbelievable. That was, as a Missouri fan, I think back to the Norfolk State game. Like, that's the one that gives me nightmares when they knocked off the 2-seed Missouri in that chaotic year a few years ago. And that's kind of what it felt like watching Gibson Southern yesterday. We're just like, they launched a 3 and it's going in, launch a 3 and it's going in. And just an unbelievable performance by them. Norwell goes on that run in the third quarter. I'm going to pull up the numbers here. Sit with me. They shot 53% in the third quarter to start clawing their way back. And they go on this monstrous run to get back into things going into the fourth quarter. What did you see changing from the Knights' perspective as they came back to make a game of things?
The way to the cliche in coaching is the way to extend runs is to get stops. And I thought they started to get a little comfortable and a little familiar with how Gibson Southern was attacking their 1-3-1. I thought the reason why I didn't think anything changed on the offensive side. I thought Gibson Southern continued to stay home. They were just kind of finishing those twos. But if we looked at how Gibson Southern decided to attack their 1-3-1, again, to use your mind's eye, like some people attack it in a dice formation. If you can imagine the 5 on a dice with the 4 black dots and the 1 in the middle. So in your mind's eye, imagine if the top right-hand corner throws the ball to the bottom right-hand corner on the dice. That middle black dot is then supposed to, through scheme, dive to the block or dive to the front of the rim. Gibson Southern was getting that early in the basketball game. Gabby and Chloe and everybody were doing such a great job of throwing over the zone. And then as Norwell would rotate, Paige Schnaus would dive. And that's why she was getting all of those layups early in the basketball game, because they were running that kind of dice formation. Norwell fixed that. I think they started to push up their second line a little bit, started to be a little bit more aggressive on the traps. And that allowed them to have time to recover, because they were kind of lollipopping that pass a little bit more so they could get in front of Paige Schnaus, and they were deflecting the basketball at the top. So I thought Norwell, in getting back in the basketball game, did so by getting stops on the defensive side and really establishing themselves in their own 1-3-1.
Yeah. Mackenzie Feast had 8 points in the second half. Kennedy filling with 12 points. I'll shift to that last play. Eric Thornton called it, I think it was Iowa. It's a play he said they never run this year, but they practice it all the time, and it just felt like the right time to do it, and we see it right there. They run it to perfection. They get the shot, they get the look, and not unlike I was sitting with Kyle Soakland, who covers Gibson Southern, covered Forest Park last year. It felt like that lapel Forest Park game where she gets the look. It's who you want to have the ball. And, I mean, it looked like it might go. Like, it looked good from the sideline. It looked like it might go. The shot just wouldn't fall. Heartbreaking finish for them. But with how Gibson Southern defended them all game, I mean, that was a perfect play for that moment. It kind of speaks to, I mean, the senior leadership, and then also just how good of a coach Eric Thornton is to have that play in his pocket and have the girls ready for it.
That I'm glad you brought that up. That was so remarkably fascinating to me. Like it is, if you remember, they missed the second of 2 free throws.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a chance to make it a 2-possession game, but they didn't do it. I think that was with Hank, 8 seconds left, something like that. 8 seconds left. They missed the second, and then Feast gets the ball in live ball change of possession. And I mean, I think Eric was like, oh, do I call a timeout? Do I not call timeout? I think what he did in that instance was say, okay, let me see if Feast can get something free, or let's see if we can get them to make a mistake defensively, maybe a 1-pass-3, get a really good look. But they tagged the shooters, but Feast kind of walked up to the line. I kind of thought that she had a look there, and Eric called timeout. I think when he sees the film, I wonder if he would regret calling that timeout. Now, we've talked in the podcast different strokes for different coaches on that. Okay. Like I would call a timeout 100% of the time. I would have called it probably at 8 seconds. I probably wouldn't even have given Feast the opportunity to probe, but sideline out of bounds 5 seconds. That's like every coach's like dream. And then to get it to filling with a chance to tie the game at the buzzer from the 3-point line is it's like a player's dream. It was awesome. And it would have been a great punctuation to get in overtime. And I had the text ready to go, because I was like, you called overtime. My God.
I know. That was the score right. I would have had the score right too, I bet.
I was like, oh my God, he's going to get this. Norwell's absolutely going to make the shot. It was a great set, but it just didn't go down. Yeah. I have a sidebar point though. And this is going to be I don't know how you'll react to this. I don't know how other people will react to this. I had a problem with the court. Okay. I just did. No, I thought the 2 3-point lines. Okay.
Oh yeah, that was annoying.
The second 3-point line doesn't need to be there. There's no scenario on a high school court where that second where that second 3-point line has any significance whatsoever. Yeah. Internationals, no, they play on a longer court. Collegiate, no, they play on a longer court. The professionals, no, they play on a longer, like a high school court is smaller than a college court. There's no reason to have that line there. And I thought it messed with kids' heads. I just did. Yeah. People can disagree with this all day, but I saw a lot of people. No, of course, it didn't bother Jayla Lampley. We'll get into that in the second game. But I thought for the most part, kids just, when that line is there, I think they toe that line and they don't toe the other one. And it's further back. And statistics will tell you that when you shoot from further back, the percentages are likely going to go down. I had a problem with the court. I'm not calling the IHSAA out. It's beautiful. Your product was great. I just would love for somebody to explain to me why that line is there.
I'll go there. Like, why have it there? It's stupid. And it's confusing to the fans too. Like, golly, like the number of times that I heard that's not a 3, your foot was on line. It's like, well, she was shooting it from way back there. It's not, It's just like it's bad for the fans. It's like, at the Sanford Pentagon in South Dakota, I'm sure you've seen the pictures where they have like 15 different lines because they have like G League, NBA, college, high school, everything there. Like, it's similar to those vibes. And it's just, like you said, it's unnecessary. Like, the court itself is beautiful. I love the designs, the rising sun, the big thing in the middle, the shrubs, whatever. It's great. But the two lines are just, like you said, it's unnecessary. It's silliness, Danny. Yeah. It's silly.
It doesn't make any sense
to stand for it.
No, and Team Norwell, that's why she missed the shot, because the second liners. I'm just
there's a take.
100% why.
That's what Courtney would have said, and then she would have pulled out a shoe or something, a prop.
I know. Well, Courtney can get away with that without being criticized. I'm gonna.
That's right, because she's the least involved of all of us in this in this world. So she can just say all that stuff, and we take the shrapnel. But no, I think the one thing that was really frustrating, I'm sure if you look at this from a Norwell perspective, and like, it wasn't that last shot that it didn't fall. Like, that happens. That's basketball. It was the possessions that they had when it was a 1-point game. I think they had 3 in a row to get a look at it. And it just like Gibson Southern kept leaving the door open, leaving the door open, leaving the door open. Even at the end, they left the door open, and Norwell just wasn't quite able to bust through. And it's heartbreaking for those kids. Just, the couple times that I've gotten to see him, getting to talk to him today, and then just following Eric over the years and then talking to him this year, getting to meet him and stuff. Your heart breaks for those kids in that situation. And then on the other side, I mean, Gibson Southern, like we've been saying, what else can you say about them? Just an unbelievable performance.
Yeah, I mean, let's just kind of spin through the players here. Like Norwell, let's don't look at the stats. Don't look at the box, okay? Filling was good. She was.
Really good.
Filling was good, okay? And I know she would have liked to have been better, but the way they defended her, yeah, man, she was good. But the way they defended her, guys, I'm telling you, she wants to catch and release 3. That's what she does best. But they weren't going to allow that. Even if like Rossworm and Feast were getting into the paint, or Hubble on inside out, they were going to stay home on her. And she had to kind of reform what she was getting and had to turn into a dribble attacker. Feast has always been good, but Rossworm was great. I mean, we kind of just mentioned her just breezing through. I was embarrassed because I mispronounced her name. I saw it up on the board. I was like, oh my God, it's Rossworm. I think I called her Rossworth, but I'm going to put respect on that name. It's Rossworm because she was awesome, but she was deflecting the basketball. She was a big reason why they got stops. We have given a lot of flowers to, people like Lola Lampley, who plays at the top of these zones, Miley Waring, who plays at the top of these zones. Meredith Tittner plays at the top. Like, Rossworm is as good as all of them. And she was really good. I don't know what she had, 16, 17 points. That's got to be way above her average. But she was very effective. And I thought she was key because I thought she gave Filling time to adjust to how Gibson Southern was defending them, because she does have that quick first step where she can go. But Gibson Southern, man, I think Stephen Thomas had it. I mean, I had it a couple of weeks ago, but I kind of got off of it. Sabe kind of picked up the flag and started running with it. But the Paige Snouse effect was so good, man. That kid.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not talking about the points and the rebounds. The double-double is super impressive. But when you run that dice formation, that 5 dice formation, and you throw the ball over, we call it throwing it over the zone, you have to be able to be available in the middle. And even when she was clean, even when she wasn't clean, she would pin Hubble on her back. She was so good tonight in offensive rotation. And how many times in the first half did you see Gibson Southern look like they were in a bad spot on the floor with the basketball, and the outlet that they threw was to Paige Snouse because she had a defender behind her. She was amazing. And we talked about them from the 3-point line, the cold-blooded one a shining moment 3 from Gabby Spink, Chloe Graham's excellence, particularly in the second half through that the run where they 18 something where it kind of stretched it out where she was hitting all the threes. But Paige Snouse made Sabe look brilliant because she was the big difference in the first half of the game.
Soklin and I were talking about her during the game, and he was marveling at her turnaround, and it is really cool. I remember on that sectional show when he came on with us and he was talking about Paige Snouse after she hit the buzzer beater, and he's like, this kid is just playing out of her mind. He called it there. He said, watch out for her. And sure enough, here we are 2-3 weeks later talking about her again, this time on the state's biggest stage. With respect to Washburn, she finished with 14.7 rebounds. She averages about 12, so right around her season average, but a great performance from her, only a sophomore. And then one more stat here on Kennedy Filling. She drew 6 fouls, which is significant and, was significant in that game.
Yeah, you're right.
Danny, I'll let you have one closing thought if you have it on that game before we jump up to 4A.
Gibson Southern cements the theory of a big three. And it was just a mathematical formula to win the state championship at 3A. They have 3 really good, highly productive players, particularly on the offensive side, and role player production from Ravelette and Malone. But their big 3 of Chloe Graham, Paige Snouse, and Chloe Graham, those 3 kids, that is a heck of a big 3. And they all showed up tonight, they all showed up last night. And I think it's a lesson to us all that, that you can just go out and be you. Like Gibson Southern was just them. This is what we do. These are the players that score. These are the players that hit big shots. But they were really good. I felt for them. I kind of leaned over to the bunch of coaches that I was with when Norwell was going on that run. Gibson called one of those timeouts, and I was like, that's a helpless feeling over there. Like it's a helpless feeling because it's just like an avalanche coming down on top of you and you're just trying to figure out a way to stop it. Well, what stopped it? Kids like Gabby Spink making shots, man. Like there wasn't a drastic, I didn't see one anyways, and I was looking for one. There wasn't a drastic change. They didn't change what they were doing offensively against the 1-3-1. Fascinating sequence at the end with Norwell's selection not to foul and to try to turn him over. That was very cool to kind of see, but in the end, it was a player bailing out a coach. Like, what else is new? Like, Gabby, great shot.
Yeah. Let's move up to 4A now. 55-28. Lawrence Central puts the crown on what was a dominating, historic season for them. First title in program history. First 30-win team since 2016, I think, as I recite that off the top of my head. First one from 4A since Ben Davis did it. We talked about them last week and just the historical context that Ben Davis team went on and what Lawrence Central could do. Let's start with the first quarter because that's when we can talk about Lake Central, and then we'll talk about the rest of the game because that's when we're going to talk about Lawrence Central. I'll start with the beginning and just how perfect of a game plan Joe Huppenthal had, and it was great, well executed. From the Lawrence Central side, Layla Abdurakib and Mariah Garrett all mentioned kind of the nerves. In fact, Mariah Garrett, God love her, was sick, overcome with anxiety before the game. And it was the coolest thing, Danny, because I'm watching them come out on the floor and the 2 Lampleys and Layla and maybe even Anaya too, they all like take her by the shoulders. They're like, you're going to be okay. Like they're emphatically telling her, like you can read the lips from across the sideline, you're going to be okay. And then they pull her in for a big hug. And it's what makes high school sports so cool. And it makes what she does, which we'll talk about here in a minute, even better. But for the Lake Central side, the support was there and they came out guns blazing. And, a 6-0 lead, it's not big when you look at it now with a step back. But in the moment, they were doing everything that we talked about. They're running their offense. They're avoiding the turnovers. There weren't many deflections. They were turning Lawrence Central over. I think at one point it was like 2 field goal attempts to 6 turnovers for Lawrence Central, which is insane.
Yep.
You couldn't really ask for anything more out of a start by Lake Central. Everything was there.
But there was no panic, too, at the same time. Like, they got down, 9-2 or something like that before they went on that, 25-point run. I've got a cool Mariah Garrett story, but let's kind of stick with what you were talking about, too. Lake Central, a lot of times you see this in football where, offensive coordinators or head coaches or teams or franchises will script the first the first series or the first 10 plays or the first 15 plays. I'm going to give credit to Sabe on this because Sabe texted in our group during the game. He didn't send a lot of texts, but the one that he did send was, great coaches that they show that they can script against Lawrence Central's man and have effect early in the game. We saw Stuck do it down at Center Grove. We saw Huppenthal do it with Lake Central. And those are not the only 2 times that we've seen it. But I like sets. I like offensive sets. In fact, I love my sets, but the design of the set is one thing. The timing of the call is another. And I'm going to transition from Lake Central's great opening because it was against quarter court man. It's the calling of a set is the same thing as the calling of a defense. And I thought Lawrence Central nailed it last night. Like, I thought they nailed the timing. It was timed perfectly. Like, Lake Central comes out in straight man and there wasn't outward pressure. They gave up some baskets, nothing crazy. But they really weren't worried about their lack of execution on the offensive side. They just got Lake Central comfortable. And from my perspective and where I was in the arena last night, I could see Lawrence Central's assistant coach, Terrence Johnson, hold up a sign, which I think is new. I think it's new. I think they were expecting maybe a lot of news. But it said Red H. And I would assume red is either the color designation of their 131. It could have been the temperature of the pressure that they wanted as well. But the H probably stood for half. And so here comes Red H. And I turned to everybody and I was like, okay, like, this thing might be it might be over. Like, this is it. Here they come. Like, we're going to find out what we learned in class. We're going to find out if Lake Central can break it. We're going to find out how they're going to space the floor. And they go into Red H. And what they rip out? Like a 25-point run. They had Lake Central stuck on 11 forever. And it just proved that that they're just better. And that's the unfortunate part.
I had the tweet queued up because I saw the Red H sign too, and I assumed the H was for Hank because they're fans of the team. So it's like Red H, like Reds. I like red. I'm wearing red right now. Their team colors are red, and then H is for Hank. So that's what I thought it was. The red hat actually makes a lot more sense. One quick, I'll stay with Lawrence Central here. You talked about that, and that's something that Huppenthal talked about afterwards too. Was just that ability of Lawrence Central and Janon Lampley, just the way that she rotated defenses. And he said you can never get comfortable in the half court because they're constantly moving things around and taking you out of what you want to do, be it a 1-2-2 or a 1-2-1-2 or whatever it is, whatever number combination it is, or the man defense. And they're just constantly cycling. So you pair that with the inability to hit shots when they did get the open looks. And then you pair that with the unforced errors, like there were a bunch of turnovers, which were caused by the pressure that Lawrence Central brings defensively. And then you pair that with everything else, and it's just a perfect storm for Lawrence Central. And honestly, and I'm going to have this in an insider column that'll publish it, when we're done with the show, but you can take away those mistakes. You can knock a few field goals off of Lawrence Central's final total. And honestly, I don't think I think Lawrence Central still wins that game, and they probably still win it comfortably because they're just so good. And a sliding doors moment for this team, their season, as I transition to bigger picture, and then we can go back to the game itself. But the sliding doors moment was that Marion County quarterfinal against Lawrence North. Layla Abdurraqib and Jayla Lampley lead them on a 9-0 run with Abdurraqib. The moment itself is the intercepted pass to the lane with 12 seconds left that puts them ahead, finishes the 9-0 run, and sends them on their way. If that doesn't happen, I wonder how this season looks, because that's the one that's like, hey, we're ready for this. We can win the big games. We can beat our rival. We can do all these things. And that's when, for me at least, and I think I've mentioned it here and I've probably written it too, I've certainly talked to you about it and other coaches about it. That was the moment that was like, hey, we can come here and we can win a championship right out of the gates. Like, we've paid our dues the past couple of years, and now we're ready to go. And you see the culmination of that yesterday. And it's like, with that Lawrence Central team, man, it is mesmerizing watching them on offense. It really is. And then watching them on the glass too. They had a 39-19 advantage on rebounding. That's insane. And it looks so effortless because they're so tall and so long. They just reach up and boop, they got it. It's so much fun to watch. They were a fun team to watch last night. And just the progression over the years, the progression over the season has been really cool to see.
They've gotten so much better at that 1-3-1. And again, they don't run it traditionally. Like, they don't run it the way that Norwell runs it. They don't run it the way that Noblesville runs it. They push you up on that second line and squeeze you against that timeline. How many over and backs did they have? I remember the one play where they, I think they threw it away, I think, a couple of times. I think Milosnik maybe got pushed up against it, stepped on the line one time. But even when they did break it, they were so sped up on the offensive side too, like because of their length. And there was one play where I think it was either Bishop or Clayton, one of the two, took a shot, and those two kids were so good through this state championship run. And I don't want to minimize that. So let me preface what I'm about to say with that they've shot the ball really well. But I remember they hit a shot, they took a shot from the left wing right across the court from Lake Central's bench. And I think Clayton missed it, and I just hung her head. And I kind of made the comment, or somebody made the comment to me, is like, look how defeated they look, and that's what Lawrence Central does to you. And I don't mean that in any way other than the context of basketball, but they demoralize you. They just absolutely demoralize you, and it's very frustrating. And it's tough to play that, especially when they lull you to sleep at the beginning of the basketball game. It's almost like they get off to these I don't want to call them poor starts, but these slower starts. Yeah. But they do. I mean, they drop every game down 10, but no one ever thinks that they're not going to come back. It was like, well, they're not in their 1-3-1. Of course, they're going to come. Of course, they're going to come back.
Let's pause on that real quickly, because I got some quotes they're going to go in the Insider. So the 6 people who are watching this, you're getting spoiled on the column. So congratulations, this is your perk if you don't subscribe. Hupp said that. He's like, they just flip a switch and they go, and there's nothing you can do. He watched them Center Grove Plainfield throughout the season. He's like, they get down to halftime, and like he said, you kind of know what's coming, and then they just go, and there's nothing you can do. And that's a feeling of helplessness. And honestly, I think that what you said about them demoralizing their opponents, like, that's not unique to Lake Central. That's everybody. And I think that's kind of like the highest compliment you can pay to Lawrence Central, because they're just that freaking good. And then I talked to Jayla and Lola about it specifically. I asked them, because they were talking about the nerves and all that, and what kind of – I asked them broadly, what was it? When did you feel like you settled into the game? And they straight up said, Lola said, it's when they punched us in the mouth. And Jayla, and it's just like, that's when, like, we took their run, and then it's like, okay, now we got to go. We got in that media timeout. We're like, okay, we got to go now. And then Jayla said the same thing. It's like, we knew they were going to come out desperate, because they have 5 seniors, and, she knows the talents of Riley Milosnik and Anaya Bishop, and then Vanessa Wimberly, who's obviously a junior, but they play together, Jayla and her. So she's like, we know they were going to be desperate. They're going to be fighting. And she's right. And it does make sense when you look at it from that perspective. They're the desperate team. And a fast start was so important for the Indians. Lawrence Central took it. They settled in. They're like, okay, now it's our turn. And then just gone. Just boom.
Yeah. Well, you get so out of character, and Sabe and Courtney and everybody on this pod has taught, Candy Wilson said it. Stephen Thomas said it. Lisa Finn said it. They all said the same thing. You cannot replicate that length and speed in practice. And that's the thing. And I thought it might be, I pause again before I paused the first time I said this, but I thought it was going to be an advantage to Lake Central that they had played before, because I didn't think that the length and the speed of the game, the speed and the length of the individual pieces within Lawrence Central's half-court trap was going to shock them. I thought they were going to be ready for it, and I thought it was going to be more about spacing and direct line passing. It wasn't like that at all. I mean, it was like a different speed than what they even showed at the Limestone Classic when they played them in December. It's continually gotten better, and they fixed some of the rotations. They knew where they were vulnerable. Like, it was intricate, and it was very good. And I got to tell you, like, as I watched more Lawrence Central basketball through the year, that press it just kept getting better and better. In fact, the shirts shouldn't say LC versus everybody. It should say Red H versus everybody. That is the sickest defense since Ben Davis had their full court run and jump man. Yeah. But Red H is your t-shirt, because that defense is, holy smokes, man. It's so good.
And listen, Lawrence Central, if you don't want the Red H shirt, I'll take it. I'll help you make a Red Hank. I'll paint myself red, whatever, so it's cool. So if you don't want it, just let me know. I think the LC versus everybody was because of one tweet that I sent out absentmindedly in the moment that got spun into a thing. Cause I don't know who was against LC. I think it's kind of been known the entire way that this team's really stinking good,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but shifting focus to Lake Central, some little storylines to me that were cool, just having been around them now for 3 games in a row, which is unique and cool to do that for teams outside the area. And it's always fun to get to know these teams like that. But Nadia Clayton, man,
Yep.
Huppenthal joked with her before the game. He's like, "You're my pick to click, Nadia," and sure enough, that young lady goes out there and she hit some big shots early. She had the 5 points. She had a couple field goals, a 3-pointer early on. I mean, those were some big shots for her. And it was just so cool to see her from where she was after the semi-state semifinal against Homestead when she was in tears because of her offensive struggles. To see her come out on that biggest stage 2 games later and do what she did early on was really cool for her. And just, I mean, that kid has such a bright future with the way that she defends, the way that she's stuck with it. She's such an important piece to that team. Vanessa Wimberly's only a junior, 14 points against that defense, 3 steals, 2 early on. I mean, she's phenomenal. She'll be a junior all-star, no doubt.
She'll be a junior all-star. Yep.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm interested to see what senior all-stars they get on there. I mean, Malosnik has a case. Anaya Bishop probably has a case too. Nadia Clayton could even enter the conversation if they want a good defender. I mean, there are just so many options there. And then Kennedy Burks, I'll tweet this out at some point or put it in there, but just what she did or how she earned that mental attitude award. I wrote about her in the preview leading up to it and just how she's one of those kids that just has a propensity for popping off at a moment's notice, you know, just randomly go ham in a game like she kind of did against
Noblesville. Exactly. Yeah. She went crazy then against Noblesville. Yeah.
Like it's cool to see her get rewarded for that. And Huppenthal kind of addressed that too. He said, there's nobody more deserving on this team just because she stayed the course. She stayed with the process. And I mean, that's unique for kids these days. We were talking about that kind of before we went on air, but it's unique for a kid like that or for kids in general. To stay the course the way that she did, but she flourished in her role and got that award. And it was cool to see her be recognized at the end of the game.
To represent the region in the state championship, to beat South Bend, Washington, in what a lot of people felt like was the biggest upset of last year's tournament. Like this group, particularly the 24s, and I'll throw Wimberly in there at 25 too, because, you know, she's been associated with these kids for so long, but they had a great high school career. And don't allow the lack of a state championship to minimize what they've done. They were really good. And let's go back. I mean, the North had kids like Talia Harris. It had kids like Micah Lusky. It had, you know, kids like Reagan Wilson, Addison Baxter, Jordan Poole, the emergence of Lily Graves, Lily Barnes, and it's Lake Central that represented the North side. They were the team that advanced further right than any of them. And I think that's a credit to Malosnik, Bishop, Krieger, Clayton, Wimberly, and Burks, and then Joe Huppenthal as a coach. It was a great outfit this year. I would go back and say it was a great 2-year run. And honestly, it's probably, you know, on the top shelf of the 2-year runs. If you look at the teams that have had the kind of those 2-year runs, theirs is as good as anybody's because there's only been 2 state winners. So theirs has been good as anybody. So congratulations to them. I'm certainly going to miss those kids play and who knows? I think you're right. I don't know. Maybe Bishop has the best candidacy, I think, to maybe wear the Indiana Stars, but we'll see. I would like to see Lake Central rewarded for that, at least through one basketball player on the All-Star team.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too. I mean, all the coaches that I talked to on the leading side, they all kind of mention it, and just it's just such a big deal to get here in the first place. And it's easier, I think, as an adult and from our positions to look at it that way, obviously, because we're not 16, 18-year-old kids in the moment. You know, it's easy for us to have that kind of perspective in the body of work. But I mean, what Lake Central did over the past 2 years was incredible. I mean, they played a tough schedule last year and made some noise. And then this year they beefed it up even further. I will never forget that December and what Huppenthal put those poor kids through, what he put himself through traveling from Lake Central to Bedford, then Lake Central to Newcastle. Again, the drive from Indy to LaPorte sucked. So I can't imagine what it's like doing those 2 trips around the Christmas holiday. But yeah, and a fun group to be around, man. Like just the mentality, the energy that they gave off. It was fun to see that reward, and it's a very relatable team. One other note that I wanted to pass along. I was introduced to this story. It was actually HSE's AD, Jim Self, gave me a call. I'm doing my best Danny Riego impression here. Jim Self, Hamilton Southeastern AD. Buddy, great guy. In all seriousness, he gave me a call and gave me a heads up on Lake Central's manager, who is the nephew of Joe and Chris Huppenthal's brother. He has Down syndrome. His name is Brendan. And I've been told and have confirmation from multiple sources that Brendan is the most popular kid at Lake Central High School. Joe said that they will be going around the grocery store and people will come up and just say, "Oh, hey, Brendo," like freaking out, so excited to see him. And, the adults are just like, who the hell's that?
I
But
love
it's just how popular he is. I think he was described as the president of Lake Central. Just an awesome kid. I got to see him before the game, kind of hung out around the Lake Central bench to just see him interacting with everybody. I asked him after the game if he had fun. He had a lot of fun. And he also said that Riley Malosnik is his favorite player because she shoots a lot of threes. So I love the energy that he brings. I'm going to have a story on Brendan and what he's meant to that program and just everything else that's gone into that. A really cool thing. I'll have that later this week as kind of an unofficial tie up to everything. But yeah, I'm excited to share that story because he's truly an awesome kid. And all the quote tweets and the replies that I saw about him were just phenomenal too. So really awesome thing and just a cool story, cool non-basketball story tied into basketball.
That is a cool non-basketball story. That might even get me to subscribe, Hank. I might actually read a story.
Oh, big day. The whole 99 cents Mr. Moneybags. How blessed are we?
Let me shift back to the champs.
Sure.
This is totally ironic and not a setup, but you wrote a story speaking of subscriptions on Mariah Cantor Garrett. Okay.
Yeah, last night.
And this is totally ironic, but I ended up watching the majority of the 3A game with Mariah's dad.
Oh, really?
And the whole time I'm like, I'm just like, don't you gotta go? Like, you have family in town. Like, what are you doing? Like, talking to me. And we talked a little bit about the game, like Lake Central. We talked a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about, his daughter, but we just kind of talked hoops. Like, he was so loose. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't uneasy. He was cool. He was relaxed. But he was also like totally confident. And I don't think he would mind me sharing this, but I was like, does anything in this game kind of worry you? And he was just like, no. He's like, I just kind of feel like if we're us, I think we're going to be okay. And it was totally confident. It wasn't cocky. It was just totally confident. Yeah. And then I read your story about, Garrett kind of freaking out a little bit before the game. This is a kid who has been extremely confident through this run. I mean, she scored the first basket against Center Grove. Confidence can be the only adjective to describe why she took that contested 18-footer early in the basketball game, where it was like, whoa, it can't be what you wanted there. But then I read I read your quotes about like how Jayla, you mentioned it just like 5 minutes ago, like how Jayla Lampley like put her hands on her shoulders, like, relax, we got this. I think all of the coaches there, all of the fans there, all of the parents there, exemplified by what Jeremy Garrett, Mariah Garrett's dad, said to me. Just, they all breathed so much confidence into each other. And Jayla and Lola and Abdurki have every reason to be confident. They're such extraordinary basketball players and extraordinarily talented. Yeah. But I mean, even everybody else, like, and Mariah Garrett is the perfect example. I think if you read some of the quotes that Janan Lampley has had throughout the year, she's like, hey, this kid. And that stuff is breathing confidence. And she was she calling it like what it was and what her observations were? Yeah, probably. But at the same time, I thought Mariah's confidence was so high. And I just think that they had this perfect storm. There was no uncertainty there. I thought it was just kind of a cool story because it wasn't just the kids. It was like everyone around the program. And he was wearing his LC versus everybody shirt when he was talking to me. And he's obviously closer to the program than either of us ever will be, Hank. But I just think a cool thing to see his confidence and it kind of be seen through his daughter's play the last couple of weeks.
She hit 2 field goals and a free throw, and they were the 3 biggest shots arguably in the game because Layla Abdurki broke the seal. I tweeted out this morning. She broke the seal. Then Mariah Garrett gave them the energy. She was doing so on the defensive end, and then she hit the jumper and got the 3-point play that kind of got him kickstarted in the second quarter that started that 19-0 run. And it's cool, too, because I remember after the sectional game when I was talking to Janan afterwards, the first person she brought up was Mariah Garrett. And just defensively, she's like, look at what this girl does. She's the shortest player on our team, which for me is relatable because I'm also short. So
same.
Me deep. But no, just like the way that she defends and like just to see her reward in that moment. Same thing, same energy as like Nadia Clayton for the Lake Central side to see that for Maya Garrett. And like you said, just the confidence. And that's something that's cool. And something that I love about high school sports overall is just like the camaraderie and the way that these kids rally around each other. Like coaches have their role in doing that too, and they're awesome as well. And they do so much for these kids, but the way that the kids themselves come together and lift each other up, and even just crossing lines, man. Like Jayla and Lola, I think it was Lola just going through like stopping and hugging everybody on Lake Central like they knew, and, you know, picking them up a little bit. You saw it after Noblesville lost to Lake Central last week when Reagan Wilson, Ava Shoemaker, and I had to track her down because she was over being Reagan on the other side of the floor. You know, same thing I'm sure with like Chloe Spreen after the Jennings County, and just all these, you know, there are countless examples through the year, but just really cool. And then obviously yesterday with Hadley Crozier, when she went down, just everybody going down there and on the Marquette Catholic side to, you know, tip their cap to her and give her well wishes, just things like that. It's just little things like that that make high school sports cool. And the way that LC was able to build up a poor girl that was in the back puking before the game because she was just so riddled with anxiety, understandably so, everybody was. The way that they were able to pick her up and give her that confidence to deliver and perform in such a big moment is awesome. And it speaks to some of the behind the scenes things that not a lot of people are privy to, that speaks volumes about a team's character in respects to being teammates and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Danny, we've hit 40 minutes. So in an effort to wrap this thing up, I will let you have the floor for one final thought on the 4A championship.
Yeah, it's really the perfect punctuation to a great season for Lawrence Central. But now we start, you know, and we start this narrative that I kind of said during the picks show. Like, is this a Ben Davis-ish kind of run? You know, the kind of 2008, 2009. And I think now everyone has to realize, because they're going to see the same zone next year, except everyone's going to be bigger and faster and stronger and older. You know, development isn't linear. So I suppose we can't say that, but it's not going to get worse.
Yeah.
You know, I think they'll stay motivated because they have some history to change. But I think what we're going to see now, I think we're going to see teams attack them differently. I think what we found out is, and let's remove Center Grove from this equation, because I thought Center Grove did actually have the construction to be able to play their own basketball game and beat them. But I do think I can say with confidence now that that's the only basketball team that could do it in the state. I think everybody else has to do something maybe a little bit out of character. I wonder if, I was thinking about it on the way home. Like if I was coaching the next high school game, and you got to remember, this is not an indictment to all the coaches that have coached against them, because I'd have done the same thing. I try to shorten the game, take some possessions out of it. But I think what you're finding is these teams are just out of rhythm because they're running 60, 75-second possessions and they're out of rhythm. I wonder if they're going to get pressured a little bit more. And I'm not saying like you should press them. I mean, but the coaching cliche is that you press a pressing basketball team. I wonder if we're going to see like, I mean, I think you got to try to get stuff in live ball change of possession. I think you got to try to turn them over. So I think you got to trap ball screens. I think you've got to, run some doubles. Like, you know, some people will say, hey, we're going to double the second pass, or we're going to double every time Jayla catches the basketball, something like that. Or, take a kid that and not guard them. And run them into a kind of a zone basket protection kind of thing. I think next season, I think what we're going to see is we're going to see everything in the bag, because I think most people just try to say, hey, we're going to shorten the game, with the exception of Lawrence North and Center Grove, those two teams. But everybody else was like, hey, let's shorten the game, let's take possessions out of it, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. I think we've got to do something different to try to beat Lawrence Central. But until then, they're going to wear that crown and people are going to try to rip it off. And there's a gigantic target on their back, but good luck.
I'm really excited to see what that schedule looks like next year. Like, I really want to see like an HSE Lawrence Central game. Like, that'd be amazing. Like, see my Macalessi going against that outfit, and everybody else at HSE brings up, be phenomenal. Like, teams like that. Another Center Grove regular season game be really fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot to dissect, a lot to unpack. I think we've been talking about it. We'll probably be back maybe this week, maybe next week, just to do kind of a wrap thing and way too early top 15. We have some different ideas for the off season. But yeah, this was fun. I'm glad we got to do a show in person. It's good to be back on the StreamYard too, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, how was the vacuum, by the way? Did you listen? How's the vacuum? So there's this live show that we did between games, and we were basically talking about the Class A, Class 2A. And we're in a suite at Gainbridge, and I say, hey, it's like a professional production. We have like the stadium in the background and this table. And then they like come into the suite next to us with a vacuum.
Yeah. They were kind enough, though, to let us stay in there, which is awesome.
Yeah,
and then just walking out and seeing that. I'll end it with this. Walking out, you and I, into the concourse as you're getting ready to walk out for gymnastics. Just the sea of red and blue waiting to get in for the start of the 3A championship game was unbelievable. Gibson, Southern, and Orwell over-delivered yesterday. Lanesville was friggin' amazing. my goodness, just the fan bases for those programs was incredible. The atmosphere for that 3A game was phenomenal. Just a really fun day of basketball, a fitting end to the season that was expectedly dramatic, wild, unexpected, all the things. Some really cool stories to come out of it. And yeah, fun day of basketball, a fun regular season. We'll be back to kind of wrap things up in a few days, maybe a week. We'll see how much time Josh and Courtney need to recharge. Danny and I are like the Energizer bunnies. There's no stopping us. But for Danny, for Courtney, and for Josh, we thank you all so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Congrats, champs.